It's currently spider season, so if I see a single crawler up that wall, that camera's going to end up through the window in just sheer fright and panic. Inchcolm, Colm's Isle, Iona of the East, is one of many islands in Scotland's Firth of Forth, and one of the few that are actually inhabited by or visitable by humans. Me, my mum, my dad, my dog. We all went on a family trip together to Inchcolm Island to explore it and its whopping archaeology. Because there's, Jesus Christ, there's a lot. And I'm here today to report back our findings. And I got a 30 quid goblet for my troubles. If you're interested in archaeology, ancient history, sometimes more modern history as well, sometimes, then hit subscribe for me. Don't be shy, hit subscribe. This isn't going to be a full, vlogged tour of the island, by the way. There's plenty other channels that have done that before on YouTube if you want to see that. I am focusing just on the archaeological building remains. We just want the lore here today, alright? Give us the lore.
The lore, guys! The lore! The lore!
In terms of pre-abbey monastery habitation, some sources have said that a hermit used to live on the island by their wee self. And even before the hermit, it's thought that there was maybe a Celtic settlement, Scottish Iron Agey sort of settlement on the island before the abbey came along and was built on top of the remains. I couldn't find out much more information about either of those instances, but I just want you to be aware that possibly there was a hermit on the island and it was possibly even older than what we think it was with this other settlement, but I can't give you any more than that, okay? There's just nothing about it anywhere. But be aware, the abbey, which is the main ruin on the island, that was founded in 1123 by King Alexander I of Scotland. After he sought shelter there during a storm when he was on the sea. And he was like, oh my god, I can't get back, I'm going to die. Help. Then when he died in 1124, before the abbey was actually finished, his brother, King David I, took over and oversaw the construction of this abbey. Say abbey, it was a priory at that stage, but he oversaw its construction, got it finished, and he invited the Augustinian canons to actually run it. The priory was elevated to full abbey status in 1235, and it had various extensions and bits added on throughout the years as it grew in size and status, and more people were coming to live on the island. During the 1400s, an entire new church was built, with the old one becoming the place where the abbot's residence now stands. One of the island's most significant abbots being Walter Bower from around 1417 to 1449, I believe. And he's most famous for being the author of the Scottic Chronicon. That's a difficult one. Which is an epic chronicle of Scotland's history. I've been born and bred in Scotland, right? I've never heard of this document before in my puff until now. I should have been taught that in primary school. You know, I should have heard about that before now, but I haven't. It took him 7 whole years to write it, and it starts with the biblical creation of Scotland, all the way up and through to the death of King James I, sort of 1437. Don't want to look at my notes for that one. I was right, 1437, when he died. That's the span it covers, because that was contemporary history at the time. I'm astounded by this document, and I'm going to dedicate a full video to it in due course. If you want to hear about that, you absolutely will, because it's amazing. And I don't know why I wasn't taught that in school. But it wasn't always peace and quiet for the island and those who inhabited the island and the abbey and all that, right? The island being in the middle of the Firth of Forth, right in the middle of where ships are going to go by to attack various parts of Scotland. It was frequently under attack, especially from the 1300s into the 1500s, because of various wars with England. Need I say more? So English naval raids constantly had the monks and the other inhabitants of the island fleeing and having to just abandon it and come back later, and abandon it and come back later. The last proper abbot in charge resigned in 1544, but people continued to live on the island till about 1578. And then after the Protestant Reformations in about 1609, all of the abbey buildings and surrounding buildings were secularised, and that put an end to the abbey and its use once and for all. A lot of the buildings after that were repurposed into just normal buildings, not religious ones, but also a lot of them were torn down so that the stone and the other building materials could be reused. With the abbey out of action, the entire island became somewhat of a fortress. there's no somewhat about it, it did become a fortress. Fortifications of Inchcolm Island began during the Napoleonic Wars. In 1795, the first gun battery was installed on the island because of a growing threat from France. And the fortifications sort of ebbed and flowed and whatever due to threats, oncoming threats, and then no longer being threatened. So it was slowly added to over the years. These defences were not just to defend Inchcolm Island itself, it was to defend the entire Forth estuary. And that really peaked, don't know if you've heard of it, World War I and World War II as well, the sequel. Inchcolm became part of Fortress Forth. Again, I've came up through the Scottish education system. Those islands are not that far away from me. Didn't know that that was like a collective thing. But this was essentially a naval project to fortify many of the islands within the Forth estuary to protect Edinburgh, capital city of Scotland, the Forth rail bridge, iconic and very important connecting bridge for all of Scotland, Rosyth naval base, which was like the big naval base for Scotland at the time, and Leith docks. Leith! They literally garrisoned 2 whole islands just because they were afraid that Leith was going to be hit. I might need to do a whole video on just Fortress Forth as well and sort of summarise what was going on there because that's hilarious to me. But at the time, Leith was its own little town that, God bless her soul, was like a very important trading port. So it was actually a big deal back in the day. Not just a gentrified student area, to say the least. During both world wars, the island was garrisoned by about 500 soldiers each time. Because I say it's a wee island, but it is fairly big when you're on it. And a lot of these wartime structures are still visible today. Various gun batteries. There's a bunch of sort of unidentified buildings because they're empty. A lot of them are rubble. We don't really know what their specific use was. But also, in 1916, an ammo tunnel was built cutting across the east side of the island. Oh my god, it's like something straight out of an episode of Ghost Adventures. It's terrifying. It was pretty cool though. But I was also like, oh my god, this, if there's going to be ghosts on this island, this is where they are. But this ammo tunnel was built by the Royal Engineers to, oh my god, no way, take ammo from one side of the island to the other without having to cut through all the buildings that are on top. What? An ammo tunnel used for manoeuvring ammo? No way! Because the guns were huge. The big, huge, like, stationary guns that swing around, like in bloody Indiana Jones or something. Like, huge things. There's none left. You can just see where they would have sat and the sort of rails that they would have span on. But there's no actual gun left. At least not on this island. Unfortunately. Inchcolm is home to so many well-preserved ruins. I know well-preserved and then ruins in the same sentence doesn't really work, but the ruins that are there are very much intact and really, like, they are well-preserved, alright? The Abbey is actually the best preserved monastic structure left in the entirety of Scotland, which is actually quite surprising considering it's on an island in the middle of the sea. And like saltwater corrosion, like, you'd think it would be in a much worse nick given the fact that it's out in the middle of the water, but it's not. Somehow, the Lord hath found a way. My favourite bit of the Abbey, first off, they have a ducat, or a dovecot, if you're posh, but they have a ducat, which would have been where the doves or the pigeons all sat, and they would be... My dad has pigeons, he's a pigeon man, so it was just a very cool thing to see that, like, that's such an old sport. But it was also used for, like, sending letters and that, but it's just a cool thing. But my main favourite bit is in the warming house, which is a little upstairs sort of room with a big fireplace. And it looks like just a sort of octagonal empty room, but on the walls there's painted inscriptions. It's just one line, and there's not really like a big huge sign to say look at these. There's like one tiny little plaque on the floor, but they're covered by the sort of perspex plasticky glass stuff so that they don't fade any more than they already have. But it's very, very faint lettering written in like Scots Latin-ish, sort of medievally Scots writing. And it's very, very fragmented, so we don't know what the full passage says. But the bit that can be read has been translated. And it says, let me read my notes. It is foolish to fear what cannot be avoided. The safest thing is to fear nothing but God. Conscience overcomes whatever the evil tongue has composed.
Huh? What? Oh. Okay.
Painted walls like this were a huge medieval decoration trend, with these sort of repeating patterns, floral patterns, and then biblical verse just painted on the wall. And only this tiny wee bit survives in here, but the whole room would have been painted like that. Looking at these remains, all we see is like the stone structure left, but thinking that the entire building, when it was completely constructed, would have been huge, and it would have all been decorated in the same sort of manner, with these painted scripts on the walls and these patterns and this, that and the other. It's amazing. These little things that we forget about when we're looking at ruins, because it just, you know, we just see the sort of the skeleton of the building, really. And it can be really hard to like reconstruct in your mind exactly how that would have looked. But these sort of little tiny bits that do remain of like paint, I mean, paint doesn't preserve very well. Let's be honest here. It's really rare that we get something like that surviving. But when we do, it does help to sort of unlock that bit in our brains and go, this whole room would have looked like that. This is how they decorated their walls. They didn't just have plain stone. And in addition to the abbey, there's also all of the war stuff that still survives. I mean, the fact that that tunnel, although it's scary to walk through, hasn't collapsed, that's mad! Not to mention the gun batteries that are literally all over the island, but also all the buildings on top that would have been probably like barracks and storage rooms, and there's loads of military things that I don't know the right words for, but you know what I mean. Loads of these little rooms, like operating rooms and medical bays and things like that. But when you look at it, all you see is, again, the skeleton. They've all been graffitied, or they've completely collapsed, some of them, and they're completely empty. But it's still amazing to be able to go in and stand in those little rooms and be like, people actually worked here. Maybe that's just me. Maybe that's just an archaeologist thing. Maybe that's just an archaeologist thing that no one else is going to understand or get or feel. And in the grand scale of Scotland, I know Scotland is quite small, but in the grand scale of Scotland, and then the Firth of Forth, even though Inchcolm is one of these teeny tiny islands in the middle of the Firth of Forth, it's hugely significant to the Scottish historical landscape. Hugely. Like, the Scotichronicon was written there. It was part of Fortress Forth. It had this really important abbey on it. It had links to past kings of Scotland. Like, there's a huge amount of history there, and even possibly going back to like sort of Iron Age, before the abbey was even built. I mean, take that with a pinch of salt. There's so much history on that one tiny little island. It's mad. It's madness. I feel like that went awfully quick. I feel like I've been talking at 10,000 miles an hour, and I'm sorry for that, but sometimes I get a wee bit overexcited and I talk really fast. Thank you all so much for watching though. If you enjoyed the video, or if you actually learned something, feel free to give me a wee thumbs up so I actually know that you listened and took in the information. Hit subscribe as well if you would like to see some more, and ring the bell as well so you're notified every time I put up a video if you really want to, but you don't got to. My bibliography and further reading will always be in the description box below if you fancy reading up about this yourself. I will be doing an extra video on the Scotichronicon. If you would like one on Fortress Forth, please let me know in the comments, and also any questions that you might have, pop them in the comments as well, and I'll try my best to help you out with that. As well, in the description, as part of my further reading and bibliography, there will be links to like the Maid of the Forth page where you can actually book a trip to visit the island if you so want to. I'm not sponsored. I'm just letting you know. Forgot to say that at the start actually. You have to get a boat all the way there and back. Obviously it's an island, but you can book on it and get a lift. Also let me know in the comments which island of the Forth you'd like me to do next, because there's absolutely loads of them. And I would like to make a wee sort of series out of this maybe and cover all of them, which might be quite hard because some of them humans aren't allowed to visit. But we'll try it. We'll see. Let me know what island you want next, or whatever other topic you want next. I may listen to you, I may not. Cheery bye, troops. Hope you have a lovely rest of your week, whatever you're doing. Doing anything fancy? You going out this week? Why no? I shall see you so next Tuesday. Cheery bye.